Does f-stop really matter when you're talking about photography? Of course it does, dummy. Who you calling dummy? Shut up, Carol. Stick around and you'll find out. Hey everybody, how we doing today? I'm Josh from FB Imaging and FBimaging.com. What is the role of the f-stop when you're talking about video and photography? Well, it's basically how wide the aperture on your lens opens up, allowing more or less light in depending on what you're trying to do. Now, wouldn't you always just want to allow the most light in anytime you're going to take a video or a photo? It would make sense that yes, you would, but that's not always going to be the case. So for specific creative reasons, you might not want to. So let's say I wanted to eliminate ambient light from a room and I'm going to use a flash in my photography. Well, then I might stop that down so that I can eliminate that without cranking my shutter speed to something that would push my flash into high-speed sync. Or if you don't have a camera and flash combination that can even do that, then you would have to manipulate your aperture so that you don't have to push it into that high of a shutter speed. Usually that's going to be around 1/200th of a second. Now, what's another good reason why you'd want to change that? Well, if you're taking a picture of a large group of people, you're going to need a smaller aperture on your lens or a higher f-stop number because you want all of it to be in focus. When you shoot wide open, especially with something that has a very wide aperture, with something that would be fast, as they say, f2.8, f2, f1.4, things like that, you're going to have a very shallow depth of field. And if you're using something like an 85 millimeter, you're already going to have quite a bit of compression because that is a medium telephoto lens. So you're not going to get every bit of that picture in focus because your depth of field is much smaller. So if you look at this photo of my brother-in-law, he has his finger out and he's smiling. I shot that, I believe, with a 50 millimeter wide open. I wasn't using a flash, so I was using all the ambient light, and it was in a bright room, but I got a beautiful bokeh, I got a beautiful blurred out background, which is something that you'd like to have, but the problem with it is, if you look at his finger that he's pointing at me, it is out of focus, and his face is in focus. So if you could imagine that that was a group of people, I mean, anybody standing less than 6 inches in front of him is going to be out of focus. And if you don't catch that right away and you go to edit those photos later, you're going to notice that certain members of a family or a group are not going to be in focus, and that's really not what you want. Now, if you look at this photo of my daughter that I took just a couple test shots not long ago, you'll see that it's tack sharp throughout, because I shot that at closer to f5.6, I believe, or maybe even f8. And that's a couple stops, probably 3 stops at least, smaller aperture. So it's allowing in less light, but I was using a flash, so I was able to do that without having to worry about the ambient light of the room. So anytime that you're trying to either eliminate ambient light or gain something, a higher depth of field, then you're going to want to stop that down. Now, if you're shooting in low light conditions, like say you're shooting sports indoors and your subject is going to be just one subject, you really don't have a ton of options, and you can't stop that down because if you crank up your ISO, you're going to get grainy photos. So in summary, when you can do a very shallow depth of field when you're shooting one subject, you can shoot very, very shallow, very high apertures, low aperture number. Now, if you're shooting a large group, 4, 5, or more, you're probably going to want to shoot something along the lines of at least f5.6, depending on your lighting conditions, preferably f8. And you can actually look up, if you do a search, you can look up the sweet spot for your lens as well, because there is a certain point where if you stop your lens down too much, there is some aberrations that happen in your photos that aren't going to be necessarily what you're going for. And while yes, you can have a very, very deep depth of field, there is a balance that is a sweet spot for most lenses. It's usually going to be generally 2 to 3 stops below maximum aperture, but every lens is different. I believe DxOMark is a website that can tell you that. But go there, check them out. There's a ton of useful information all about that. If this is useful for you, please let me know. Like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, FB_imaging on Instagram. Go to FBimaging.com. I'm Josh. Have an awesome day.